You hear him all over the place. You hear him on the Seahawks broadcast, radio broadcast. You see him on Q13, and now you get a chance to hear him here. Jordan Babineaux is with us. How are you, man?
What's going on? Happy Friday. Thanks for having me. Excited to be on and chat with you guys about football. And I know you guys are going to put me on the hot seat, and I get to play GM at least for one more day with some of the moves in the offseason that we anticipate the Seahawks will make, but I'll do my best.
Well, Babs, we'll get into it. I know Bob has lots of questions. He sent me a video, but I would say this. I know we were talking about, possibly Geno and things like that. A few years ago, you called it before 2022, you said Russell Wilson's not going to be here. And I think I said something like, I think Jordan might be high or something like that. But then you ended up being right, man. So, yeah. That's one of the main reasons why we decided to talk.
Oh, well, again, that was an interesting time. I think when something similar in terms of where the Hawks are, when you look at that time and with all of the conversation and back and forth between, Russell's camp and Russell's agent and where the franchise was and the opportunity that they had to move him, we see something similar. And it could be happening again in terms of, who they're going to turn over the keys to the franchise and lead the organization to the championship. I mean, this was a really well-coached team at spurts at different times. At different times, they were undisciplined. And we saw the inconsistency of this team, but a lot of things to build on in terms of the foundational first year for head coach Mike McDonald, and what he and his staff is trying to do, what he and Schneider are trying to build with getting this organization back to the postseason. So I see something similar brewing with Geno. And again, I know they have a decision to make here in a few weeks, but I mentioned this on the broadcast with Aaron on the postgame show that I think that the starting quarterback is not on the roster if we're looking at it today versus in a few months when they tee it back up in August.
Yeah, that was what struck me, Jordan, is you didn't really hedge. You weren't like, well, this could happen. Keep your eye on this. You were like, no, I don't think Geno is back next year. You said the same for DK and Tyler, and we'll get into those guys in a moment. But what specifically is the reason you think they move on? Is it that he's going to want more money than they want to pay him? Do you feel like there might be a better option out there for him at that spot, and they can, cheaper, and they can invest in the O-line? Or what do you think is, in your mind, what causes you to say that with such confidence that you think he's not back here next year?
Well, I tell you what, I will admit, I admit I thought they were going to retain Ryan Grubb and build on, what they did this year on the offensive side of the ball, though. I know a lot of it was just inconsistent from a running game perspective, that he just wasn't as committed to the run. But I thought, availability with Kenneth Walker was also a part of, why I felt that there wasn't much of a running presence. But again, I was surprised the next day. I mean, heads started rolling and Ryan Grubb was the first one, out. So, now it gives me further, speculation that looking at a potential and who the new offensive coordinator will be, that he's going to want someone, who can lead that offense. This would be Geno's third offensive coordinator, if that were the case. I just see this team being young. And if you look at the history of what, Schneider has done with this franchise over his tenure, is he's always looked to get younger. And, Geno is a capable quarterback. I think he's still a starting quarterback. He had his best year as a pro this year. I just don't see him on the Seahawks roster the next season, simply because they'll be looking to bring someone in to nurture and mature a young mind with newness and freshness and something different at the quarterback position. So we'll see if I'm right again this year, but again, I'm only playing GM from afar.
Well, Babs, what did you tell us what you liked about Ryan Grubb? And because you said you were surprised or you thought that they would retain him, but what were some of the things that you liked about him and the way he worked with Geno?
Yeah, well, I mean, one, he had a lot of audacity. He had a lot of success at UW, obviously did well there, and brought a little bit of, that same personality and confidence to the league, and particularly in the passing game. Look, we've been around the game long enough that you can't just drop back 50 times and throw the ball and think that you're going to have success and win 16 games. You got to be versatile, and you got to find other creative ways to do that. I thought initially one of the things that really stood out to me was the way they adjusted in between halves or in-game adjustments. And he wasn't too committed, at least at times, too committed to one particular style of trying to get a win. I can't recall the opponent, but there was one game when things weren't going so well in the first half, and they came out and had an explosive second half. It made me thinking of the Frisco game when they made some adjustments and scored 21 points in the second half. So I thought that, his ability to adjust in the game were really a characteristic that stood out to me.
Yeah.
But then again, too, the performance as well. They moved the ball. They were a team that relied on the big play, the explosive plays. But when they got into the red zone, Geno made some errant throws or decisions that took points off of the board. As a coach, you can't control that, right? So again, to me, that was probably the one thing that stood out. Maybe the lack of a presence of a run game and commitment to that. To me, was probably what went into the firing. But again, I still believe that I still believe that Grubb can build on this year's success, him personally, and still has what it takes to be a really good offensive coordinator.
Hey, Jordan, the other two guys you mentioned on that broadcast, you thought Geno wasn't coming back. You also said the same about DK and Tyler. Now, Tyler makes more sense. He's towards the end of his career, even though seems to have made it pretty clear he intends on playing, whether it's Seattle or elsewhere. But it wouldn't be a shock for him to not be retained by the team. But DK is a guy that we've talked a lot about, and hey, do you pay him? Do you pay him as a number one? Is he more of a number two? What's he expecting? What do you think what's your biggest reason for saying he will not be back?
Well, as you look at his tag this year, I think DK set to make upwards of 30, both he and Lockett, and there's no way you retain both of them. Lockett, looks and feels more like he played his last game as a Seahawk, but, in respect to the career that he's had here, he certainly merits availability or, a future prospect of the Seahawks Ring of Honor with his career. DK, this was really the first year that we saw, production drop off, and he had, in fact, missed 2 games, and that was rare. But even when they decided to give him, a new contract, they only did it for 3 years. So it tells me that was another test. So let's try him out for another 3 years. Let's see if there's drop off. And again, in, kind of his development or growth as a pro, fell short of, 1,000 yards this season. I don't think that's the big reason. I think a lot of it, too, is about bringing something fresh and something new, a dynamic talent. DK he is a star number one receiver. What I don't believe is that they'll bring him back at the number at $35+ million.
Hey, Jordan, as far as offensive line, we've talked a lot about that, and I think, pretty much consensus that they struggle at offensive line. Is that something that you think is coming from college, and it's just, a product of, the NFL sort of highlighting, the quarterback to receiver, the throws downfield, things like that, and it's gotten kind of sloppy? Do you think or do you think it's just, that's just that the world we live in right now, where it's been a tough go at offensive line, and that's why. What do you attribute that to?
Well, you make a great point. I mean, the development of college players is certainly different, in today's game. And again, similar to talking about Ryan Grubb's success, it was successful at that level, didn't necessarily, translate it in the league. But we're also seeing that, with players. And so I think it's essential for player development, skill development, to really be more of a focus. And guys just don't have the time from the time that they're done with college to the expectation of playing their first pro snap, to really mature in a way where they have the skills, they have the hand-to-hand combat, the techniques, the drill work, the footwork, because the defense, they're just so good. And the room of error is very, very, very small. Mm-hmm. So you're seeing players at the pro level more exposed or less ready to play at this level because of how or what particular offense they might have played in. I think this is the offseason where the Seahawks will finally invest in the offensive line. Now, we've seen them do this in the past, and to me, correct me if I'm wrong, but over the last 10 years, the biggest offensive line acquisition that they made was Dwayne Brown. Under Coach Carroll, there was very little development or investment into the offensive line, and now you look at what happened in the middle of the season. Your veteran center decides to step away after bye week, and now you bring in Olu, and some more, the other players kind of fighting to fill that void. I think this is the offseason where the Seahawks finally invest in the offensive line. You got a head coach in Mike McDonald who came from the Baltimore Ravens, where the trenches were a big highlight primary. It was the gold standard for their success. They had success and are still having success. If you look at Baltimore, they're having success because they're winning at the offensive line. They're winning at the defensive line. And I think that's where we'll see the biggest investment in protecting the quarterback, particularly if they decide to bring in a young quarterback versus acquiring a veteran quarterback that might be available.
When you say investment, are you talking about free agency, or are you talking about draft investment? Because we've talked about the fact there aren't great O-lines throughout the league. There are just a handful, the Lions being one of them, and we were just looking at their starting five. 4 of those starters are first-round picks. The other guy's a third-round pick. So they've made a significant draft investment in their line, and it's certainly paying off. So as the Seahawks go, do you see them – is it a combo of both? They're going to get some free agents and spend more than they otherwise would, and maybe draft some O-linemen higher than they otherwise would, or how do you see them addressing it?
Well, I think they only have 6 picks in the draft this year. There's a first and second round up there. Notoriously, we've seen Schneider fall back to get more picks. I think we'll also see investment at the linebacker position. Again, Ernest Jones, the fourth, conversations still remain there. But they're going to get I think they're going to get younger. Tyrese Knight, I think, will be back, as a starter, but he'll be competing for his role, and there'll be higher expectations from 1 to 2, being that he became a mid-season starter. We look at acquiring veterans on the offensive line who have some of that experience, and I think we'll get a little meatier, height and width. And I know at the offensive line is going to be, 2 key attributes to explore. But I think it'll be a combination of both, given the fact that there aren't many draft picks in this year's draft, and they need to address a few positions directly.
I like that. We have a new way of describing offensive linemen. Meaty. We need some meaty guys. Hey, you mentioned Babs, Ernest Jones there. And, he really turned things around. We talked to J.B. Long down in L.A., and, when he was with the Rams, he said they don't pay off-the-ball linebackers. But Do to me, it looked like Ernest Jones really turned that defense around, and he was very instrumental. And I guess I would think there's no chance that they don't bring him back, but I don't know. Maybe they don't want to do that either. What are you thinking that maybe they might draft somebody or find somebody somewhere else, or do you think they're going to pay him?
Well, I absolutely agree. I mean, acquiring Ernest Jones, mid-season for him to come in and have the effect that he did on the defense was quite spectacular. And I think they kind of found someone who can, perform at that position in Mike Macdonald's defense. His defense, I hear, is pretty complicated, but to me, in comparison to Coach Carroll's defense, the playmakers on his defense were at the third level. It was the safeties. It was Earl Thomas. It was Cam Chancellors. This defense, particularly, it's at the second level. It's at the linebacker position. It's at the nickelback position. Though that's why you see Spoon so active around the ball. Yeah. His ability to blitz, his ability to tackle in space, his ability to cover when he needs to, and more importantly, this defense was built or is building itself in disguise. They're able to, create and show different looks and confuse the quarterback or have the quarterback make decisions with the ball in his hand. But at the linebacker position, I still feel that Mike Macdonald's defense, the primary focus is at the linebacker level. And if I don't know Ernest Jones well enough, but when you have a player who's been traded twice in the same season, I don't know what that says. I mean, there's something there. And again, it's not, I can make any kind of speculation to make the story true, but I'm uncertain whether or not, bringing him back, is, whether or not something that Schneider and them will do. It wouldn't be, in my opinion, based on performance. It has to be something else.
Hey, Jordan, what's your take on the job that John Schneider's done? It seems as of late he's taken some slings and arrows from some in the media and certainly fans. And when we point to the problems of the O-line not being unique to just this year, and the linebackers you brought in the offseason were gone by the middle of the season, so that doesn't look great. But, I mean, overall, is he a guy you think this is a prove-it year for him, or he should be – I don't know, his seat should be hot, or you feel like, no, he's got too much, he's accomplished too much? Where are you at with the job John Schneider's done?
I think everybody's in the hot seat. I'm not kidding. I mean, there's so much, I don't want to say necessarily tension in the organization, but there's so much expectation in the organization. And I think much of it has been that way since the loss of Paul Allen, right? I mean, there's a lot of uncertainty with the organization. Everyone feels the urgency and the need and desire to win now. And that's on both sides. That's, on the business side and the football side. Performance is key. You have a team that's still short of the playoffs after winning 10 games, and that's rare. But again, it wasn't good enough. The expectation is what it is. You look at Schneider and what he's done. His success in his role was, in the early part of building that championship defense for, as long as it did. I mean, they were top. They were the pinnacle. They were what I would call what Tampa 2 defense was in the early 2000s. People wanted to mimic that. They were trying to duplicate that and bring that in their own franchise based on what the Seahawks were doing during that time. Now, again, since, has he taken some slack, with some of the draft picks, some of the lack of investment? You look at what happened this year. He finally had the keys and had full control over the roster and decision-making. And then, sure, it does merit a lot of question. It does. Because everyone's role right now is under a microscope. So every move has to make sense. I know, Sherm on his podcast had a lot to say about letting Wagner go and bringing in, Dobson and whether or not, that was the right move. I said it in the beginning, like when, bringing in, 2 linebackers that hasn't played, 16 a full season at that level, to me they were just a Band-Aid. They were trying to get to what the real fix was. And unfortunately, while they started hot, they had a hot start, 3-0. I mean, that's about as best as you can start. We did see, some real drop off in terms of that second level position. As I mentioned, the expectation of the second level in McDonald's defense and the lack thereof, this defense really kind of having an identity. I still don't know if the defense has its full identity and they're building something, because we'll see a lot of turnover again on that side as well. So is he on a hot seat? Maybe it's warming up. But again, he does have a track record of success long enough that he can get the right players in the building to create this championship defense that can go compete against the McVays, and of the world. And I think that will be the focus this offseason.
He is Jordan Babineaux, one of the great Seahawks. You hear him on the Seahawks broadcast. You see him on Q13, and you just heard him here. Great stuff, Jordan. We really appreciate you taking some time with us. Thanks so much for that, and I'm sure we'll be talking again soon.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Have a good weekend.
Thanks, Babs.
You too.